Hi.
My name's J. Stein McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching accesstv.org.
Hello. Is it on? Hello, hello. This is a wonderful view. Look at all of the very beautiful people.
So we're going to open with a little bit of poetry today. I will read two poems I wrote for the Witness Stones project of Old Lyme. This project remembers the formerly enslaved, lest they be forgotten. I'll begin by reading the Witness Stones monument for Arabella. Arabella, also called Bella, enslaved nearby before 1719 by Reverend Moses Noyes, willed to his daughter 1729, baptized 1734. Arabella makes soap. When blood is in the air, she renders tallow over fire, drips water onto ashes until lye runs down the stone. Baptism's sanctifying grace washes one clean, but still leaves a body black and bound to a white man who apportions a rationed blessing. Soap boils into a bubbling froth and foam until it mellows into a mild jelly atop her tongue. If she has not leached the lye from her own desire, burned to ash, how can baptism truly cleanse her? If Reverend Parsons were to baptize her with the white god of the blood moon, let her into heaven to be anything but a washerwoman. Her soap boils into a bubbling froth and foam, but Arabella is unclean. Wantonly, rapturously desirous of freedom, Arabella is a sinner. A forsaker of slaves, be obedient to your masters with fear and trembling. Even so, the submitted Arabella will sink into the baptismal basin, knowing she will only reemerge as herself. We worked with a historian, Carolyn Wakeman, and amongst her notes was this little bit of information that I thought was very interesting. General George Washington is thought to have rested at slave owner McCurdy's house while traveling from Boston to New York in 1776. Humphrey would have prepared for the distinguished guest. When George met Humphrey, Washington's late September blue-grays question the darkness of this slave's eyes. Fury flash-cooled in a deluge of tears turned obsidian, edged in bleached eagle talon. Humphrey's eyes only reflect back Washington's war-weary face. It is safer this way. A slave is all function and no humanity, whispered assent and dust kicked up when he turns on heel, 2 steps ahead to prepare the way, 2 steps behind in his ordained place. Humphrey is the darkness Washington steps through on his way inside to the warm hearth and smells of roasting mutton and root vegetables. Tonight, Humphrey will bed down in the stable, fresh from a stint on the sea, the delicacy of rat meat, unpocketed wild onions pinched between weevil flour biscuits, still on his tongue. Thank you. Thank you.
We are grateful to Antoinette Brimbell, a fellow member of the Stowe Prize Book Selection Committee, professor of English at Capital Community College, and Connecticut's 8th Poet Laureate, for kicking off tonight's event with an invocation. Welcome to the 11th Stowe Prize for Literary Activism celebration. I am Dr. Michael Mallory, Chair of the Stowe Center Board of Trustees.
And I'm Karen Fisk, the Executive Director of the Stowe Center. At the Stowe Center, we talk about slavery.
We tell the truth. The America we know is built on the backs of people kidnapped from their homes and forced to labor with complete disregard for their humanity.
We tell the truth. People are resilient. They resist. They use their skills and intelligence to forge freedom.
People risk their lives to assert their human rights.
The stories we tell are true stories. They're backed by primary sources, the words and actions of freedom seekers and their allies. These stories expose the worst of humanity and the best of humanity.
The words and actions of freedom seekers define an American story that we can embrace. A story that celebrates the determination and intelligence of disenfranchised people who assert their humanity for the better of all.
This American story is not afraid to speak the truth and affirm democracy as a thriving, diverse community of thought and action that has the potential of building a just society.
This American story recognizes that all people, have the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. We are really glad to see you here tonight to honor Percival Everett, the amazing Percival Everett, with the Stowe Prize for Literary Activism for his novel, James.
We have an exciting program prepared for you this evening, concluding with a conversation with Percival Everett and historian and professor of history, Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens.
Our program tonight is scheduled to end at 8 o'clock. However, we want to let the conversation continue to its natural conclusion. And for that reason, if anybody needs to exit the program at any time, we totally respect your needs. Thank you.
All right. The Stowe Prize for Literary Activism recognizes a distinguished book of general adult fiction or nonfiction that illuminates a critical social justice issue in contemporary society in the United States. In creating this award, the Stowe Center acknowledges and celebrates the power of literary activism. This evening and the ongoing work of the Stowe Center would not be possible without the generosity of our donors and sponsors. We are especially grateful to the Hartford for their loyal support of the Stowe Prize. I'd like to welcome Anna Dumais, Vice President, Associate General Counsel at the Hartford, and member of the Stowe Center Board of Trustees, to offer remarks on behalf of our legacy sponsor. Anna?
Thank you, Dr. Mallory. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everybody. It's a true pleasure to be with you today as we honor Professor Everett and his novel, James. My name is Anna Dumais, and I'm honored to welcome you both as a trustee of the Stowe Center and on behalf of the Hartford, a very proud legacy-presenting sponsor of the Stowe Prize. It's a privilege to stand alongside my fellow trustees, the dedicated staff of the center, whose unwavering commitment to social justice through literary activism continues to inspire, and our distinguished honoree. Joining the Stowe Center has been a very meaningful experience personally. This organization's mission to confront history, champion equity, and drive positive change through the power of literature is extraordinary. I am equally proud to represent the Hartford, a company that believes that removing barriers to achievement and in the transformative power of the arts. In Hartford, our home for 215 years, we believe that thriving cities are built through collaboration, investment, and vision. And we bring this to life by investing both financially and in human capital to strengthen the city's vitality and resilience. For more than a decade, the Hartford has been a supporter of the Stowe Prize, helping to elevate literary works that challenge us to think critically, question courageously, and act boldly. Today we celebrate Professor Everett, whose novel James reimagines the adventures of Huckleberry Finn through the eyes of Jim. With brilliance and urgency, Professor Everett gives voice to Jim's intellect, agency, humanity, inviting us to confront the legacy of racism and the power of storytelling to reshape our understanding of history. James exemplifies the spirit of the Stowe Prize. I want to express the Hartford's deep gratitude for the partnership we've built with the historic Stowe Center. Located in Asylum Hill, the center enriches our neighborhood with its beautiful, evolving campus and its thought-provoking public programs that continue to engage and inspire our community and beyond. Thank you, and I, along with all of you, look forward to the program.
Thank you, Anna. Now, it is our profound honor to stand before you this evening to help present the 2025 Stowe Prize. This award is not simply about celebrating great literature. It is about honoring the moral imagination. It's about recognizing those rare voices who summon us to wrestle with the deepest questions of justice, memory, and freedom. The Stowe Prize reminds us that art is never neutral. Literature can comfort, but it can also confront. It can disturb the settled order. It can speak into the fractures of our democracy and insist that we see what has too often been ignored. So tonight we honor a writer who has done just that. Percival Everett in James, a novel, has given us not just a retelling of a story we thought we knew, but a profound act of restoration. He takes James, a man long reduced by history, and restores him to his rightful place. Intelligent, courageous, strategic, deeply human. In doing so, Everett refuses to let this nation continue in its selective amnesia. He demands that we acknowledge the voices that were always present, but too often silenced or erased. This work is more than literary craft. It is a mirror held up to America. It asks us to confront the silences and omissions that still shape who we are. It asks us to reckon with the distortions that have shaped not only our textbooks, but our politics and our culture. It presses upon us the question, what is the cost of forgetting? What is the cost of a nation choosing not to remember truthfully? Everett's work is prophetic. It reminds us that stories are not entertainment alone. Stories are the architecture of our moral universe. They shape what we believe about ourselves, what we teach our children, and what kind of society we dare to build. If we inherit falsehoods, we live in falsehoods. If we inherit truth, even painful truth, we have the chance to live more honestly and more justly. In James, Everett has given us a gift that is both beautiful and unsettling, tender and disruptive. He has reminded us that the task of the artist is not to lull us to sleep, but to awaken us, to stir in us the urgency of justice. And so tonight in presenting this prize, we do more than celebrate a book. We consecrate the labor of a writer who has stretched the boundaries of American literature and sharpened our collective conscience. Percival Everett has written a work that will echo across classrooms, across living rooms, and across generations.
All right, thank you. Okay, hello, beautiful humans, and anyone else who happens to be here. It's time to share some of your humanity. I appreciate you all being here. This is a wonderful prize, this is a great event, and I am so honored to have served on the selection committee. I am a child of Hartford, which means that I have all of the beautiful light that we bring and all the shade that we like to throw. Way back in 1980 and something, Hartford Stage had a play that came. It was called I Ain't Your Uncle, a New Jack retelling of Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was told from the perspective of Topsy, and it opened my eyes. When I picked up James to read it, I fell in love with the story. Windsor kids, if you read chapter 2 speaks to us. I loved it. I had a whole good time playing with this book. And what made me most excited about this book was that it gave us a place to have a new lens and view. I am so happy to see all of us here. White folks, I'm so happy you're here. Black folks, I'm so happy you're here. Other folks, good to see you here. Glad you're hearing our stories. Welcome to the story. We've been doing this one for a while, right? Telling truth through lies. Telling truth through lies, telling truth through lies. This is the very first novel that has won the Stowe Prize. Nonfiction has been very, very important. If we think about what we've been dealing with, the Stowe Prize has been around for about 15 years or so now, right? If you look at what we've been dealing with, we have needed nonfiction. People have needed to learn a daggone thing. Karen, I want to thank you so much for allowing me to run my mouth in the way that feels comfortable for me, because empathy, Americans, we need to read way more fiction. We need empathy. We need spaces to get together with each other and talk about truth through lies. This is America 2025. We don't know how to talk about truth straight up. Everett, thank you so much for giving us another place to examine truth through lies. I'm going to end my comments right now. I'm looking forward to this evening, but I want to thank absolutely everyone who showed up right now, because this is a hard time for us. This is a really, really, really hard time for us. And it's definitely a hard time for us as human beings who care about other human beings around us. So we're going to listen, we're going to learn, we're going to have stuff to ponder. We are not idiots. So we're going to play with the words, we're going to play with the ideas, and then if we do what we're supposed to do, we're going to take these conversations and go share them with other people. And we're going to continue reading fiction, and we're going to continue wrestling with those ideas, and we're going to continue demanding that we step into empathy, because it is a cruel, crazy, horrible world if somehow we understand that empathizing with another human being's story is wrong. So your book gave us a different lens, a different perspective, a new way to look at this, and hopefully a new way to enter into new conversations. Thank you so much, and have an amazing time this evening.
Professor Everett, if you could come up here, please.
Percival Everett is a distinguished professor of English at USC, University of Southern California. His books include Dr. No, The Trees, So Much Blue, Erasure, and I Am Not Sidney Poitier. He has received the National Book Critics Circle Ivan Sandrof Life Achievement Award and the Windham Campbell Prize from Yale University. American fiction, any of you all saw American Fiction? American Fiction, the feature film based on his novel Erasure, was released in 2023 and was awarded the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. His most recent book, James, this remarkable work of fiction is LA Times Book Prize winner 2024, Dayton Literary Peace Prize for Fiction finalist 2025, the Audie Awards winner 2025, the British Book Award Fiction Book of the Year Award 2025, and Professor Everett, this year's award is a piece. We would like to award you with an original piece of art by jewelry designer and mixed media artist Jessica Dickens. Woo! Give it up for Jessica.
Sorry. I showed it to Professor Everett.
Jessica is an incredible artist, and this is the piece that she always designs custom pieces based on our winner, and this is a special gift in the prize for Mr. Percival Everett, and this is sensational and amazing. So thank you so much again for designing this. Use this book. You can use my book, you know?
Look at your notes in here. And
Please.
well, thank you for this award. This is, it's touching. It's to be recognized for literary activism is especially nice. I'm not shy about saying I have a problem with awards, generally speaking, but this is different. I'm just a novelist. I make this stuff up, but it doesn't exist without readers. And I'd like to say that reading in these times, any times, reading is the most subversive thing any of us can do. I'd like to think that writing is the second most subversive thing, but it's not true. The second most subversive thing is belonging to a book club. I will read from chapter 2. I've heard so much about it. And I'll just start. That evening, I sat down with Lizzie and 6 other children in our cabin and gave a language lesson. These were indispensable. Safe movement through the world depended on mastery of language, fluency. The young ones sat on the packed dirt floor, and I was on one of the 2 homemade stools. The hole in the roof pulled the smoke from the fire that burned in the middle of the shack. I will try. Can someone turn me up? I feel like a rock guitarist. Turn me up. Oh, I see. I have 2. Papa, why do we have to learn this? White folks expect us to sound a certain way, and it can only help if we don't disappoint them. The only ones who suffer when they are made to feel inferior is us. Perhaps I should say when they don't feel superior. So let's pause and review some of the basics. Don't make eye contact, a boy said. Right, Virgil. Never speak first, a girl said. That's correct, February, I said. Lizzie looked at the other children and then back at me. Never address any subject directly when talking to another slave, she said. What do we call that, I asked. Together, they said, signifying. Excellent. They were happy with themselves, and I let that feeling linger. Let's try some situational translations, something extreme first. You're walking down the street, and you see that Mrs. Holliday's kitchen is on fire. She's standing in her yard, her back to her house, unaware. How do you tell her? Fire, fire, January said. Direct and almost correct, I said. The youngest of them, lean and tall 5-year-old Rachel, said, Lottie, missin', looky there. Perfect, I said. Why is that correct? Lizzie raised her hand. Because we must let the whites be the ones who name the trouble. And why is that? I asked. February said, because they need to know everything before us, because they need to name everything. Good, good. You're really sharp today. Okay, let's imagine now that it's a grease fire. She's left bacon unattended on the stove. Mrs. Holliday is about to throw water on it. What do you say, Rachel? Rachel paused. Missums, that water's gonna make it worse. Of course that's true, but what's the problem with that? Virgil said, you're telling her she's doing the wrong thing. I nodded. So what should you say? Lizzie looked at the ceiling and spoke while thinking it through. Would you like for me to get some sand? Correct approach, but you didn't translate it. She nodded. Oh Lord, Missums, ma'am, you want for me to get some sand? Good. Get some is hard to say. This from Glory, the oldest child, the S's. That's true, I said, and it's okay to trip over it. In fact, it's good. You want for me to get some sand, Miss Holiday? What if they don't understand, Lizzie said. That's okay, let them work to understand you. Mumble sometimes, so that they can have the satisfaction of telling you not to mumble. They enjoy the correction and thinking you're stupid. Remember, the more they choose to not want to listen, the more we can say to one another around them. Why did God set it up like this, Rachel asked, with them as masters and us as slaves? There is no God, child. There is religion, but there's no God of theirs. Their religion tells us that we will get our reward in the end. However, it apparently doesn't say anything about their punishment. But when we're around them, we believe in God. Oh, Lordy Lord, we be believing. Religion is just a controlling tool they employ it and adhere to when convenient. There must be something, Virgil said. I'm sorry, Virgil. You might be right. There might be some higher power, children, but it's not their white God. However, the more you talk about God and Jesus in heaven and hell, the better they feel. The children said together, and the better they feel, the safer we are. February, translate that. The more better they feels, the more safer we be. Nice. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Professor Everett. I am delighted to introduce our next guest who will join Professor Everett in conversation. Deirdre Cooper Owens, award-winning historian and professor of history in New England, is also a sought-after public speaker who makes history accessible and inspiring for audiences everywhere. A proud graduate of two HBCUs, Bennett College and Clark Atlanta University, she earned her PhD in history at UCLA and has held prestigious fellowships at the University of Virginia, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and is elected member of the American Antiquarian Society. Named by Time magazine as one of the country's most acclaimed experts in U.S. history, Dr. Cooper Owens is widely celebrated for her scholarship, teaching, and advocacy. Her work is deeply informed by her roots in South Carolina's Low Country, where oral storytelling traditions first inspired her passion for weaving history into compelling narratives. She also proudly advances reproductive justice through her public scholarship and activism. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cooper Owens.
All right, thank you all so much for inviting me to be in conversation with Professor Everett. But also, before we begin our conversation, I would not be the woman that my parents raised me to be if I did not thank those whose names are not listed on programs, who do the invisible labor, those who have cleaned this beautiful sanctuary, those who are over audio, visual, who even provided water for us so our mouths don't get dry. Just all of the folk. I rode in a van over here for people who had hand trucks bringing in the books that Percival will sign for you. So let's just give a hand clap to those folks. All right, let's start. I spoke with you earlier, and we have South Carolina in common. And I'm from the pretty part of the state, which is the Low Country, and you're from the Midlands. It's
Yes.
not so pretty.
No.
But there's so much about your book that reminded me of that. And so I did a lot of research. And so I hope to speak with you about things that the reviewers don't write about.
Okay.
Because I'm a historian of the antebellum era in this country, and in particular slavery. And so first I wanted to, as I was hearing you read, I have my notes, but I think I'm going to go to something that jumped out at me in chapter 2, but other parts of your, of James, your novel. I am really interested in naming and naming practices. In every review, and I know I'm not the only person, all of you out here have read it. I know you did your homework and you went Chicago Review of Books and New York Times Review of Books and the New Yorker, and everybody fixates on Jim, his ability to code switch. And I am much more interested in James, and not code switching, but how he names himself. And so this is where I look at my notes, where I think this is really important. So the most powerful sentence in your novel, in my estimation, is on the last page. James is confronted by a white man in Iowa, which is a free state, and this is during the Civil War. He's reunited with his family. And the man asks him, "Who are you?" In fact, he uses the N-word, right, as an adjective before Jim. And he answers declaratively, "I am James, just James." And so as a historian of the US 19th century and slavery, there was so much that was embedded that I loved, because he, as a full-grown man, names himself James. He's no longer the diminutive, which is Jim. But also, as I started to think about Sadie, is the diminutive of Sarah, and Lizzie, Elizabeth, and there's old George and young George. And so in your research, or in your rethinking this part of the cultural practices and productions of Black people naming themselves, how did you prepare for that, and why was it so deeply embedded in the novel?
Well, don't start with a hard question. Well, I've long had a fascination with the naming practice, even outside of naming and the antebellum, and even after the Civil War, and the fact that naming, when people finally got to name themselves and name their own children, the naming practice became really creative. That's why they're such different names in the community. Naming is a performative act. You're doing something when you name someone. And it's also an act of power, which is why when people from the West go and land, find a lake or a mountain or a continent, they name it. And then they own it, even though people have already lived there. The Aboriginal people of Australia did not call it Australia. And Amerigo Vespucci had no connection with the Iroquois or the Algonquin or the Cherokee. This is something that's done, and it's aggressive. And then it's the practice of naming one's child. That's a big deal. It means something. We have family names, and sometimes it's, again, an expression of someone's creativity, what name they use. And names do work in the world. If I were named Conway Twitty Everett, I would probably be a country singer. So naming is packed. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. And it did make me think about the kind of ways that we continue this legacy of naming. And when I say we, I'm talking about Black folk in this country. But, you know, more recently, the ways that the unique and I think dynamic ways that Black women in particular have named their children have been demonized and laughed at. And, you know, I often, in teaching these history of American slavery classes, I will ask, you know, the students, how many of you have names that are made up? Because all of our names are made up. But, you know, I'm like, in the 70s, when I was born, if the parents were together and there was a girl child, you had some form of your daddy's name. My father's Ben Cooper Jr. I'm Deirdre Benia, right? And so that kind of thing. In the 80s, you start getting the Keishas and the Las and the, you know, but there's something that I think is really beautiful about your ability to put that in there without necessarily beating the reader over the head with the cultural production of having that political act and that powerful act.
Well, and it's funny it's easy to laugh at names and because they're different. I saw a name and this was great. It was D-A. It was Dasha.
Okay.
That's brilliant. But it's also very easy to not recognize that brilliance and to make fun of it.
So, no, I'm not going to do the code switching. I just think that's too easy. Everybody talks about that. Let me go to another part that also captivated me in the book. When we get to minstrelsy, because, you know, when you start off, there are all of these minstrel songs, the lyrics to the minstrel songs. And so I'm reading it, and then it starts to, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. As we, you know, for those who haven't read it, I don't want to give everything away. But eventually, James is sold into or bought by a minstrel troupe, essentially, and has to sing for his freedom. And James is not the darkest Black person. He's, you know, kind of a lighter hued Black person, but he still isn't Black enough, so he has to put on blackface and have his features kind of, you know, caricatured. But he doesn't have to don the wig because he still has Afro-textured hair. And there is this scene that made me think about conversations that are happening today where a woman character, Polly, who you can tell is kind of smitten with James, even in his blackface and his white mouth, she's smitten with him, and the father comes, and the father is kind of taken with his appearance too, and sneaks into the tent just to touch James's Afro wig. Please give me some insight into how that enters into, you know, his experiences, James's experiences, that this white man sneaks into the tent at night just to touch his hair.
Well, if I could do that, I wouldn't have written the book.
You know, there's like a cognitive dissonance that happens.
Yeah, well, you know, the minstrelsy is interesting anyway. They take him into the troupe because of his singing voice, and but he's Black, obviously Black, but he can't perform with them in the venues because he's Black. So they make him up in blackface so that he looks like a white man pretending to be Black. This is a comment on the passing that happens so often in our culture. You know, being from the South, and I thought often people in other parts of the country don't realize they're blonde, blue-eyed Black people. I grew up with them. If they did not identify as Black, no one would know that they're Black. I had my grandfather's brother moved to New Jersey so he could be white. this happens. South Carolina, I don't know if you know this, is the only state that did not adopt the one-drop rule.
I did not know that.
Pitchfork Ben Tillman, the racist governor of South Carolina, later senator, said in a room at McKissick Library at the University of South Carolina, I was fortunate enough to stand in this room with Dr. Lewis Rubens, who started Algonquin Press. Tillman said to other like-minded racists, "We cannot adopt this rule, because if we do, none of us in this room can own land." So already there's, what is race? It had nothing to do with blood. It had to do with station and identification. And that's the remarkable thing about race, is it's purely a construction. Anthropologists at the turn of the 19th to 20th century abandoned race as a category. Yeah. It's the most persistent category that we have.
Yeah, it was, thank you. It's interesting too. This is the book I should write that people would actually buy. I'm actually married to one of those white looking black men who I met at Clark Atlanta. So it's always funny. They're like, "Where did you meet?" And I was like, "Oh, it's an HBCU love story." And then they see him, like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "It looks like his white mama, sounds like his black daddy." So, you know, it is an interesting life to lead. But what is interesting for me, like in those moments that you discuss, in your book, but even in the comments tonight, is this, like I said, this kind of racial cognitive dissonance where, especially in slavery, you have black and white people in the most intimate spaces. So black people are living in the houses with their owners. They're related to their owners. They work alongside other white laborers. So, I mean, they can never escape the gaze of white folk, right? And yet there is this curious fascination with being able to somehow touch the thing that is allegedly different. And that was, you know, it boggles my mind today. You know, it's just like you are willing to enter, you know, Polly's father, willing to enter into this space in the dark of night just to see if it's an Afro wig, you know, just to scratch an itch about whether this person is really black or not.
Well, I mean, this microaggressions, they call them now. This is, I want to touch your hair. Can I touch your hair? People complain about microaggressions, and I tell my kids, no, enjoy them. That's kind of the rite of passage. That's just being American. Recognize it. This is a sick place. You know, what do they say? What do Marines say? Embrace the suck. And that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Talking about this, you know, I've read some interviews about how you came to the idea of writing James. And often the ways that people have, especially critics and people you've been in conversation with, they'll say, "Oh, this is a retelling." And I tended to think, is this a kind of retelling of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn, or is it something different where you're not necessarily telling a new story, right? We understand, those of us living in the 21st century, at least one would hope, we understand that enslaved people were human beings and three-dimensional flesh and blood thinking beings. And for me, it wasn't so much a retelling, it was just kind of pivoting the lens and telling a more holistic story or interpretation of that past, right? I did not feel like, even though I know that this is fiction, because of what I know about antebellum era slavery, it felt like I was seeing this character as a three-dimensional human being, and you just pivoted the lens to actually include the insights and the thoughts and the experiences of the person who had been marginalized and silenced in so many ways. And so what made you pivot the lens?
Well, historically, the depiction of enslaved people has been, they're all superstitious and simple-minded. Film, television, novels, that's always what it is. Black slaves were capable of eating, sleeping, and procreating. That was it. Human beings. So that's not true. The so-called code switching, I never use that term because that's what we always do. It's just a part of being human. You don't speak the same at home as you do at work. You don't talk to your children the same way you talk to other people's children. We are different people in different places. But as this story of slavery is repeated, what it leaves out is that there were many slaves who contemplated the ironies of their situation, contemplated with deep philosophical passion what it meant to be enslaved. Otherwise, you would not have had attempted revolts like that of Denmark Vesey, who was a brilliant person. And you would not have had Nat Turner. When I present the way that the enslaved talk to each other in the novel, I don't know if that's how they sounded when they talked to each other. I do know they didn't talk to each other the way they talked to the people who had expectations about them. There were these recordings that the WPA made, the Writers Project, in the 30s, testimonies of black people who had at one time in their lives been enslaved. They're remarkable. Not so much the content, but the fact that they sound the way I sound right now, more or less. The fascinating part, the important part, the scary part is that when these testimonies were transcribed, they were written in a slave dialect.
That's right.
One that's not real, that's constructed, made up, satisfying the expectations of the oppressors. That can happen two ways. One is the transcribers are instructed to do this. The other is a little more frightening, and that is no matter how these people sounded, this is what the transcribers heard. So, it's complicated stuff.
Yeah, no, it made me think about, this is wonderful. I wish I could take my students, from Stores and bring them here, because I'm teaching a history of slavery course in this country, and so I was teaching them how to vet sources. And so...
Better be careful, there was no slavery.
This is... Supposedly, I'm teaching a very divisive thing, right? We're having a woke, dangerous conversation right now.
Do you know what one of the proposed substitutions for slavery, the word slavery, is in Florida?
Is it the one about the internship or something?
Involuntary relocation.
That's right, yeah.
Which I guess is technically correct.
Yeah, this is true. And I had them, I said, well, did Sojourner Truth in the 1830s say, "Ain't I a woman?" And so, these are students who, some of them have never heard of her. And so I said, go ahead and do your internet thing. Use Google and Chat GPT and what. So they're like, yeah, she did this. And I said, okay, remember earlier I mentioned she was born in the late 18th century in New York. And in fact, she was owned by people, I said, who were Dutch, because New York used to be a Dutch colony. And of course, that doesn't mean anything. And I said, what person from that area would say, "Ain't I a woman?" I said, she would say, "Want I a woman?" And it was just this moment. I said, but the person who wrote that, it doesn't mean that the impact or the content, like you're saying, doesn't matter, but the person who wrote it knew that people would not want to hear Sojourner Truth's voice. And so here she had to negotiate and manipulate it so people were not shocked by it. It is, yeah, incredible.
Well, I mean, the most glaring thing is Phyllis Wheatley, brilliant young woman. I think what she is, she was a teenager.
That's right.
Read Latin and Greek, had to prove to white people that she was capable, not only of writing poetry, but not of reading these languages, but writing the poetry that she did. So they gave her exams. Wow, that's the power of literacy. And that's why it frightens people so much. And that's why I've mentioned that reading is important. And there's a reason that fascist regimes ban books and burn books, because they don't want you to read. And it's very easy for us to feel good in here. All the seats are filled. We're talking about books. That's kind of positive, but you're so few. If my publisher sells 50,000 books, my publisher is happy. If I sold 50,000 records, I would never record again.
That's right.
50,000 people went to see my film, I never make another film.
That's right.
We are not a reading culture. As a writer, this makes me want to go jump off something high. But I have to remind myself what art does. In the beginning of the 20th century, Picasso made Guernica, and it changed the world. Very few people have ever seen the painting. So I have to remind myself of that when I think about participating in this whole art-making thing.
Thank you for that. And also that you are there. So I'm going to do one last, I have in my head as you were talking, I'm listening to you, but I'm also like, 19th century, I rarely have these nerdy conversations. And then we'll pivot to the 21st. But I did.
I lived through most of it, so that's
they say black don't crack. I'm just saying, you look good. You look good. I was going to ask a Civil War question, and then I said, nope, I'm going to ask a James question and the evolution of James. In your novel, we see three phases of him. And I don't mean just the name, the kind of transformation from Jim to James. We meet enslaved James. We are largely with fugitive James, who's on the run. And then we end with free James in the Civil War. And at least I don't remember, I don't think you use the word fugitive, or maybe you do.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you don't. Was that intentional?
I suffer from work amnesia.
Okay.
And I don't remember all the decisions I made.
It worked.
Now, what has been interesting to me is James has a trajectory, and finally he's had enough. And people have said to me, why does the book become violent at the end? And I just look at them and I think, what book did you read? It's violent all the way through.
That's right.
But that's an American thing. It's like, the violence doesn't happen until somebody fights back.
That's right.
And so that's one of those things.
Yeah. And that was the most interesting part, is when he fights back. I mean, he fights back in the ways that he could as an enslaved person and a fugitive person.
Well, he takes Sammy with him.
That's right. Yeah. And there is, for me, there was something so beautiful about the love for his people, allowing him to sit in, from my standpoint, rightful anger and vengeance. because he was, in his way, righting wrongs. And also there was something powerful, I think, about the way that love was not timid with Jim or James. Particularly his love for children and women and girls was just so powerful. And we live in a moment, you and I've talked about our spouses I just met him, so it's not like we had deep secrets, but I know you're married, I'm married, and we've been married for a while. And I always say, I'm so glad I'm not single now, because you have to meet people over technology and those kinds of things. But also in black male-female relationships, there seems to be at least a media-driven kind of war, where you see this really hateful, violent communication. And it was, even in the midst of the violence and the pain, James is doing all he can to protect these girls, these teenagers, to think about his wife and his daughter in the most loving way, and that the love is not individualistic. I liken it to someone like Jamie Foxx playing Django in the movie, where he's only going to free his wife and leave everybody else on the plantation. James was like, my love is so big and wide. Not only am I going to free Lizzie and Sadie, but everybody's coming. And that was something I thought that was just so beautiful to read.
Well, that's not the least of the problems in Django.
Mm-hmm. I know.
First and foremost, I don't know who gave Quentin his N-word card, but I'm taking it back. That he could not see that he was replicating one of the most offensive tropes. I call it the different strokes trope.
Yep.
And that's the white man taking in the black youth and teaching him how to live. It's repeated over and over again, the white savior. And that at the end of this film, the person who feels shocked and dismayed by the treatment of black people is not the black character, but the white one.
That's right.
That I don't mind that the movie exists.
Yeah.
What I mind is that the filmmaker couldn't see it, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. There was something that was so ahistorical for me. I teach a Slavery and Femme course, and I'm always like, liberation and freedom for people, like if a Django existed, was never individualistic. And that was also something that was so important, I think, in the way that you constructed each of these enslaved people in the novel, even in their moments of isolation. Like for James, he would dream and imagine he was in communication with other folk. And so family becomes important and community is central. It's like even in the midst of his isolation, when he is running, he is in fugitivity, it is still dependent upon others.
Okay, you're going to go with me while I do other talks, right?
Let me tell you what. This was a dream to read for me, because I am constantly reading, no shade, I'm a historian, but we write books for tenure. We got to keep our jobs and pay our bills. And so it's like the jargon and the this and that. And so I have gotten in trouble sometimes with colleagues when I'm a historian of slavery. And I'm like, I write about people who didn't leave records. James was exceptional in the fact that he could write and he could leave notes in a notebook, to be able, like you said, to listen to the WPA narrative. So for folks in the audience, that's the Works Progress Administration oral histories, and there are some recordings, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt commissions that during the Great Depression, so that folk like us and many of you, the artists who created this beautiful work, could have a way to make a living by listening to, interviewing, as they were called then, ex-slaves. But those records don't exist. So often when we're writing, you're literally writing about the people who owned folk, who beat folk, who raped folk, and trying to extract their lives, their voices, and their humanity, and it takes sometimes a little longer. And so I think what you what you've done, because you are a literary artist and brilliant thinker, the speculative and the creativity that you're allowed to write a novel like this, I think frees you in ways that I feel tethered sometimes to the archives in ways that's a little restraining.
Yeah, well, you know, all that you say is very true, and when I think of slave narratives that are told to someone who writes them down, I think of the WPA project, but there's one of the more fascinating documents we have is the Confession of Denmark Vesey. And it's very likely that he didn't utter a word. But we have this long confession of his written by the people who not only, he was free.
That's right.
And the people who imprisoned him and then killed him, murdered him, they wrote his confession for him. And that's a remarkable thing. Can any of us imagine that now? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. I am now going to pivot to the 21st century. And there was something that, I looked at the promo trailers and you were like, I'm an artist. I write novels. This literary activism thing, I wouldn't describe myself as that. And I was like, now that's funny. How are we going to have this conversation and you want a prize for literary activism? But you know what? I'm malleable. I told you, I'm flexible. I can bend where I need to bend. And so let me ask you this, because I don't know. Where are we on time? Okay, good, because I can talk. I'm going to ask you this, though. I want you, not as a literary activist, but as someone who you said in your promo trailer, politics is always there. What do we need to do to meditate, ruminate, feel inspired, get angry, move, whatever, or even just be in silence around some of the themes in this book? What do we take away from this? Or what would you like for us to take away?
Well, first of all, you're asking a writer for advice, and that's a bad idea.
I don't know. You know a lot of prizes.
No, again, the work, I hope, makes a difference in the world. Yeah, I can die now because of something someone said to me a couple of months ago at a reception. Someone came to me and said, my uncle is a diehard Republican, and he read your book and it changed him. And I'd never heard that in my life. And as a writer in this culture, that's what I always hope will happen. So I know that's happened once. But that's no small thing to me. Because I always have the feeling I'm preaching to the choir. Because let's face it, I'm not worried about my book getting banned. The people who ban books don't read books.
That's right.
So what can we do? Well, you do it. You're already doing it. Read and read with other people, and I do think reading fiction is good because it helps us think. But I think reading everything is good. I read history all the time. My kids hate me because I read math. But you don't understand a culture by examining its artists. In fact, I don't even know if you understand a culture by examining the art. You understand a culture by understanding the art that the people of that culture read and view and listen to. Doesn't make it good, but that is what's important.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your work.
thank you all so much for joining us tonight to celebrate Percival Everett. And also the American tradition of literary activism. The work we do at the Stowe Center is done absolutely in community. I want to recognize the students from the Windsor schools. They're here tonight with us. Please wave. Our incredible Board of Trustees. The Stowe Prize Selection Committee. And everyone and each one of you, thank you for being here tonight.
At the Stowe Center, we celebrate activism then and now. Literary activism is using words to intentionally change hearts and minds. That is what we are celebrating tonight. As a call to action, we invite each and all of you to consider what can you do to build positive communities of change.
Read. All right, thank you. Go ahead and say this and then I'll say the last.
Okay, yeah. So Professor Everett will be signing books in just a few minutes, right up here at the front. So you can purchase books from Riverbend Bookshop at their table in the back. Thank you, my friends. And if you would like a moment to talk to Professor Everett and get your book signed, please line up in the aisle to your left, our right. Right.
All right. You also have a survey along with your fan and your water. Please take a minute to do the QR code and tell us what you thought about this evening. That's very helpful to us. So again, thank you so much, Professor Everett. To our remarkable staff, our board members, volunteers, donors, sponsors, and most especially all of you, have a wonderful evening and please get home safe.